Second round. Golf plays Tiana Maria of Germany at 9 a.m. Golf won her first Grand Slam title when she won last year's U.S. Open. The Dodgers and Angels are back in action tonight after a day off on Monday. The Dodgers are at home for the start of a 3-game series against Baltimore. The Angels are in Detroit to try to snap a 5-game losing streak. ESPN rounded up a few experts to rank the top 100 NFL players entering the 2024 season. Here's the top 5. Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, Cleveland Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, and Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money Talk.
Here's what happens when you advertise on KBLA Talk 1580.
3, possibly 4 weeks ago, I heard an advertisement on your radio station from a company called Grid Solar. I would love to have that phone number so I can reach out to them with reference to solar panels being installed on my property.
Our listeners are aware and engaged, but more than that, they are loyal. When they hear empowering messages that uplift their community and help them live better lives, they respond. No medium reaches this coveted black audience like KBLA Talk 1580. So, hit us up today at smb@kbla1580.com and let us help you connect with our loyal listeners. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Money the bud.
Sip the juice, I got enough to go around, and the thought takes place uptown. I grew up on a sidewalk while on street talk, and then taught to Hawk, New York. I go to Queens for Queens to get the food from Brooklyn. Make money in Manhattan and never been tooken. Go uptown to the Bronx and boogie down, get strong on the island, recoup and lay around. Time to build my juice back up, pop stack up, suckers get smacked up. Don't doubt the clout, you know what I'm about. Knocking the door.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you hanging out with us in this hour of our program. And in this hour, as promised, a conversation with retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who served as a key witness in President Donald Trump's impeachment trial. We will talk about what Kamala Harris's foreign policy could, would, should, might, ought look like as our commander-in-chief in light of all the hot spots right now around the globe. Can Democrats, it's the question for me, can Democrats marry their campaign of hope and joy with lethal militaristic policies? It seems a dangerous conflation to me. Glad to have Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman to unpack all of that with us in this hour. We just had an hour spirited conversation with Connie Rice talking about Kamala Harris's domestic agenda and how we hold her accountable to that. In this hour, conversation about foreign policy. And again, delighted to have retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman on this program. Colonel, how are you today, sir? Good to have you on.
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be back, invited back on, Tavis, and get a chance to communicate with your awesome audience in Southern California.
It is my great
conversation.
No, thank you. In Southern California and around the country. I don't want to miss out on all. We're syndicated across the nation, so we're heard in markets everywhere. So I don't want to just love on the Southern California crowd, although I love Southern California. So to all of our listeners, we're glad to have them tuned in today. That said, let me just start broadly, and we will, I'll narrow it as we move through this hour. When it comes to foreign policy, again, we just spent a very spirited hour talking about the domestic agenda. When it comes to foreign policy, broadly speaking, what did you hear in the convention speech? And I recognize we've not yet got deep into public policy pronouncements, nor should we have. I absolutely did not expect, and I think Kamala Harris was right to not go deep into policy. She got time for that. This was a speech about introducing her to the nation. But in that introduction, what did you hear regarding foreign policy that got your attention, or not?
Yeah. I mean, it was awesome being at the convention last week. It was awesome being live and in person, hearing Kamala deliver, both Kamala and Tim Walz deliver their acceptance speeches. I guess this is obviously a critical issue of foreign policy, but all of it starts at home domestically with a strong democracy here. Mm-hmm. And what's pretty apparent to me is that she's captured the imagination of the American public. You have a Trump administration that looks back, thinks that our best days are behind us. What Kamala Harris has been able to do is she's been able to take the anxiety that's existed about the concerns about our democracy and transform it into joy and hope and a message about our prosperity. That right there is a vision. Leaders provide visions, and then once they have a vision, then they could add strategy and they could add more substance. So we're starting with a really good, in a good place with this kind of overarching vision of America's role here domestically, but also around the world as a beacon for democracy. With regards to that democratic or that foreign policy view, though, I would say that we could expect some degree of continuity. She's coming out of 4 years of a Biden administration where she's shepherded, nurtured, advanced Biden's view, some sort of compromise between Biden's and her view. There are areas where her views stand out strong. If you ever hear her speak about her visions for Latin America and Africa, I feel like that's a strong suit for her. She talks in these long views that by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be living in the African continent, and that we need to invest in those relationships there. She's played a role in engaging with leaders around the world. I think the tally is somewhere around 150. So she's pretty deep around the world on foreign policy issues. But what we don't necessarily have is an entire clarity around where she differs from Biden. I think there are some things that we could see. She certainly tends to land a little bit more on what's identified as kind of a progressive track, which is totally fine. I actually just finished writing a book on the idea of values primacy, the idea of centrality of values to interests. So her views very much appeal to me, but she balances that out with an understanding that the U.S. has to be strong to defend its interests, to defend our alliances, and to advance the interests of democracy, because democracy overseas makes democracy here at home more secure. So those are the big kind of wave top strokes of the Harris-Walsh foreign policy as it's emerging. And, that's pretty darn good, solid place to start.
Let me ask you then, you sort of teed this up. You didn't go all the way there. I want to push you gently and lovingly. But give me 2 or 3 areas, if you can, where you think that we can expect that there might be some differentiation in her policy versus Joe Biden.
So I would maybe some of this is hopes
Sure.
rather than clarity. But for instance, in Ukraine policy, and I know we covered this before, I still strongly feel that we live in we're at the precipice, and we could live in 2 different worlds. One world in which authoritarian regimes are emboldened and attack U.S. interests overseas and domestically. And they're emboldened to interfere on our elections. They're emboldened to nurture, these isolationist, anti-democratic, illiberal tracks that you see propagated by the RFKs, the Donald Trumps, the Elon Musks of the world. Or we see a world in which authoritarian regimes are on their heels. They're, deterred from aggression against the United States. And a lot of that hangs in the balance on what happens in Ukraine. If Russia is able to walk away with a win, I think it emboldens Russia. It emboldens Russia in the European plane with regards to aggression against other former Soviet states, Georgia, Moldova. Right now, the Baltics are pretty secure in that they're both members of the EU and NATO, but they were one of the 15 Soviet republics. So I think that's in a pressure point that the Russians would be willing to exploit. And then more broadly about Russia energized as the global spoiler. And that carries over to an emboldened China that's already aggressive in the South and East China Seas, messing around with our partners, the Philippines, with their freedom of navigation, or Iran that's emboldened to employ proxies to attack interest in commerce. Think about how the Houthis have basically shut down transit through this Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So we're on a precipice. I think the fact is a Harris administration potentially could do what happens when you have a changeover, a policy review. it's a kind of comprehensive, holistic review of what our objectives are. What are we trying to accomplish? It's not that we're there just simply to help the Ukrainians because it's the right humanist approach. We want to, protect the population. There are lots of places around the world where we want to protect the population. Core interests.
You listed a few places. When we come forward, just watching my clock here, when we come forward, I want to ask you specifically about Sudan. That issue was raised in our first hour today, and nobody's talking about that. I want to ask you about that. I want to talk more about your book. I'm fascinated by this book that you've just written, linking values to interest. That struck me, values to interest. And I want to talk about not just the rising threat of Christian nationalism, but how the Democratic Party's deep ties to the military-industrial complex cannot be ignored when we're talking about examining policy positions in the years to come. A lot more to get to with Alexander Vindman when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent. So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle.
Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
If it's gotta be clean, it's gotta be Tide Free and Gentle. This back-to-school season, Tide and Downy are giving back with $1.5 million in scholarships. Enter to win. No purchase necessary. US/DC 17+. End September 30th. Rules. Tide.com/scholarship/official rules.
Hey, checking in?
This is not just your flu shot appointment at Walgreens.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is getting your entire family vaccinated in one trip.
Hey, Mom?
And a snack on the way out. Get flu shots for everyone in your family, together. Schedule appointments online today. This is wellness made easy. Walgreens.
Vaccine subject to availability and for ages 3+. State and health-related restrictions may apply.
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZQuil.
ZQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZQuil nights. Explore our products at ZQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Did you know your life insurance is an asset you can sell? I'm Jay Jackson, CEO of Abacus Life. For almost 20 years, Abacus has been purchasing life insurance policies from seniors just like you. And at abacuspays.com, we've created a free policy value calculator so you can find out the worth of your policy in just seconds. There are no fees and no obligations. Get real value from your life insurance when you need it with Abacus. Learn more at abacuspays.com.
What make you? Yeah.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Freedom is an endless meeting, so let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who's our guest in this hour as we talk about The foreign policy agenda of one Kamala Harris. We'll be getting to that, I'm sure. If these debates ever jump off, you can rest assured there'll be many questions. Maybe not many. That's overdoing it. There are never many questions, but there'll be some questions. Perhaps there ought to be many questions about foreign policy, given all the hot spots that exist around the globe right now. So we talked about Kamala Harris in our first hour today with regard to what her domestic agenda might look like and how we hold her accountable to the best of our interest in that regard. In this hour, we're talking to Colonel Vindman about military policies. And a moment ago, you ran a list of hot spots around the globe where we might expect that Kamala Harris's foreign policy would differ from her bosses at the moment, Joe Biden. I wonder about Sudan. This issue was raised in the first hour, and again, we have so many issues to cover. Indeed, on this program, on this station, on all the stations that I'm on, in the media writ large, we're tracking issues all the time. But it troubles me sometimes how we lose sight of certain things. And we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Russia, to the extent that we are. Not much being said these days about Sudan, and that's tragic for me. Your thoughts?
To tell you the truth, it's probably not a conflict I'm steeped in. Of course, I've been tracking it, but we have to understand this is a decades-long conflict. It resulted in the split up of Sudan into Sudan and South Sudan. There's now kind of a internal power struggle for who will lead South Sudan. That looked like it was something that was going to eventually emerge, because it was a coalition of factions that were operating together to achieve South Sudan independence. And at this point, it's a question of bandwidth and priorities and where the U.S. can actually make a difference. Sometimes we forget that it's not just about the application of U.S. power.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether U.S. power could actually result in a meaningful policy outcome. So if you think about, let's say, sorry to take us back here, if you think about Russia, Ukraine, we have a willing partnership in that Ukraine has welcomed the West and welcomed U.S. support. In South Sudan, you have a civil war or a civil struggle where, frankly, none of the parties are interested in having the U.S. step in and take a side. And therefore, there's both a legal rationale that allows us to be involved. We could find some way to get involved under UN auspices that would require kind of consensus amongst the UN and the Security Council. That's a high threshold. But even if we get there, the question is, how do we wade in without any interested local partners that want us there and want us acting on their behalf to end security. So it's a question of resources and impact that we could have, and that makes it extremely challenging.
Yeah, I hear your point about resources and impact, but this takes me straight to the conversation that we were starting to have about the thesis of your book that links values to interest. And this, again, is my critique of the U.S. military, that we have a funny way of linking whatever our values are on any given day to our interests, which are pretty consistent. The interests are consistent. I'm not always sure our values are where they ought to be. Because if our values are linked to our interest, and we see this kind of humanitarian crisis in Sudan, how do we look the other way? We can make all kinds of pronouncements about resources and frames, but at the end of the day, there's a major humanitarian crisis happening in Sudan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to make this particular point, that is an example of where our values ought to align with our interests, and if they don't align with our interests, our values should still win the day anyway, and not look the other way when we see a humanitarian crisis jumping off the way it is in Sudan. Your response, and we'll move forward.
Yeah. So I would say this, setting aside Sudan specifically, but in general, there's a kind of a heuristic that I think about when we talk about U.S. Involvement, U.S. power, or the application of hard power. And it's not the military. It's really the entirety of the defense enterprise or the national security enterprise. The military just kind of ends up shutting up and coloring when they get direction from the national security authority. So, but the way I think about this is that we need to do more to harden established democracies. That's our alliances. That's what allow us to act in concert, apply resources. We need to help struggling democracies. If you think about places like Ukraine, There are tons of places around the world like this. And then we need to think about how we apply resources to places where democracy doesn't exist, but where we could advocate and propel U.S. values and democratization. So that's through civil society. And then I start to think about, specific constraints that we have. The U.S. can't act everywhere. There are limits to U.S. power. We could apply soft power in certain places that's just kind of influence. That's the ability to encourage through economic investment. And we could apply hard power in even more limited ways because we don't want to overstretch ourselves around the world or hamper our abilities to defend ourselves. So then I start thinking about, what kind of resources there are, the risks of action and inaction, and what are the core interests. So these are the ways I kind of try to think through how we apply resources or our attention to challenges around the world. What that tells me about Sudan is that this is one of those areas where, as terrible as it sounds, and as big a proponent as I am for this idea of neo-idealism, values primacy, may not be an area where we could use the same kind of tools, hard power. It might be more influence and pressure and sanctions and working through the UN or working through the EU to press for a resolution in the region, rather than, and maybe we through the UN we could apply something in the form of peacekeeping, but it's not one that we're likely to go in a huge way. And that might be a terrible thing to do, but it's just the reality of the limits of U.S. power.
Yep.
We can't go everywhere and be everywhere at once. We have to be pretty darn mercenary in figuring out where we can apply resources.
So tell me then more. I'm going to your book now. Tell me more about this notion of how we link in the years to come, because that's the ultimate question. In the years to come, how do we link our values to our interest, or what's your critique? What's your critique of that equation?
So I guess one of the things I would talk about, and you had Condoleezza Rice on in the previous hour, if you think about the school of thought that has driven parts of historical parts of our foreign policy approach, it's this idea of realism, that everything should be viewed entirely through the lens of national security interests. But the problem with that view is it tends to be very, very transactional, and it tends to be short-sighted. So we will look at, we generally look at what the problems in front of us, and we address those problems without really considering the long-term effects. Again, my case study for this book was Ukraine. And if you think about the way we approached Ukraine's independence, we tried to tamp down on Ukraine's desires for self-determination, instead choosing to support the Communist Party through Gorbachev and then through Yeltsin, who was problematic. We were transactional about advancing nuclear arms control, but then when some of these key short-term interests were addressed, we looked the other way and started catering to Russian interests. What I advocate for is values primacy, the fact that we should be looking at the world with a recognition that our values, central to our kind of democracy and who we are, should be driving the way we approach things. So what would that have meant in, let's say, the Ukraine context? We would have probably been significantly more thoughtful about, some long-term investments in Ukraine, hardening Ukraine against Russian attack. We'd be far more thoughtful about the role that Russia was increasingly playing as an aggressive military power, and not looked to cater to misplaced hopes and dreams about what we could actually accomplish with Russia, which is very, very limited, and make investments in places where we do have good partnerships, like Ukraine. So what it allows us to do is drop the short-termism, drop what's immediately in front of us, and think about what's in the long-term interest. Stability through democracy, stability through the willing partnerships, stability through, undergird or strengthening the rules-based international order, and working towards the long-term objectives, not just the short-term. That's the general thesis of what I'm advocating for.
Mm-hmm. Here's a difficult question, but I think you can handle it. And I think it probably matters to this audience. It certainly matters to me. To what extent would you link our American values, putting that in air quotes, with race? And I raise that because anybody who studied these issues as I have knows that our values tend to align with certain interests. There's that word, and those interests tend to exist in certain countries. And so when you talk about values primacy, that term itself deserves some critiquing because clearly Sudan or other African nations don't fit into the frame of American values primacy. Haiti does not fit into the frame of America's values primacy. I want to critique it through a racial lens if we can.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely valid point. I think the fact is that I guess I think about it, our values not in necessarily the way that they've been practiced, but the way that we've aspired to materialize our values. You know, kind of being the beacon for democracy. You know, our forefathers fell short in many different places, but they wanted to create a more perfect union, an inclusive, equitable, more perfect union. I thought that Michelle Obama's framing of this idea of affirmative action of generational wealth was a beautiful way to frame the opposite of the flip side of systemic racism and how we've underinvested in minority communities. So I think about it in the kind of the more aspirational way than where we may have fallen short. I also believe in that kind of the arc with our missteps and with our setbacks has been, as Martin Luther King said, towards justice.
Yes.
So that is, I guess, the way I think about it.
Yep.
What does that mean in a practical sense? It might mean that in the short term, we continue to I guess, serve our strengths in our relationships with Europe. Because that is, if you take the aggregate of the European Union, its economic power, and the U.S. economic power, it's massive and overwhelming. And if we harden ourselves against these attacks from authoritarian regimes and disinformation, then we could also have a long-term vision to invest in places around the world that have been overlooked, like the African continent, like Latin America. I mean, we have underinvested hugely in our own backyard in the Western Hemisphere. And we should be doing that. It's something that actually Kamala Harris is, and this is something I've written about too, I'm very keen on making those investments in our Western Hemisphere. That's where we should have amongst the best relationships.
Nope.
So I guess I think about this, I don't want to be party to the group I criticize, which is, been invested in hopes and fears. But I think the fact is that we're building something new. We're building a kind of a foreign policy around values primacy, the centrality of values and interests. And right now I have a pretty concrete vision that needs to be operationalized with a more coherent strategy, the application of hard and soft power. But it's all moving in that direction of maybe balancing the scales.
No, I'm all for values primacy with regard to our military and decisions made regarding our foreign policy. I'm all for values primacy, but I'm glad you made the turn that you made, because it seems to me that for too long and in too many ways, our values in this country tend to be aspirational at best. So again, let's hoorah for values primacy, but those values have to be more than just aspirational. They have to be actual. And so I'm glad you made that point, that we profess for a long time now certain things. What we do is something altogether different. So I like the frame that you're getting us to wrestle with. But again, those values have to be more than just aspirational. When we come forward, I want to talk about, again, the rising threat of Christian nationalism as juxtaposed against the Democratic Party's deep ties to the military-industrial complex. I want to also have you remind the audience of what your role was in the Donald Trump impeachment trial and ask some questions about what a Trump presidency, again, would look like vis-a-vis foreign policy. We'll do that with our guest, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know the United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time? Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The Biden administration is bringing back a new round of free COVID-19 tests. At the end of September, people will be able to order up to 4 tests by mail. The tests detect newer COVID variants and will be effective through the end of the year. Sean Diddy Combs and his legal team are asking a Miami-Dade judge to drop a sexual assault lawsuit against him from ex-employee, music producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones. The African-American media mogul claims the lawsuit contains blatant falsehoods. SpaceX is delaying an overnight launch aimed at creating a new generation of spaceflight. Tuesday's scheduled liftoff of the Polaris Dawn mission is now delayed by a day for additional pre-launch checkouts related to a helium leak. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Some people just know the best rate for you is a rate based on you with Allstate, not one based on anyone else. So if you drive safely, you could save money. Good to know. Visit allstate.com or call for a quote today.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Coco Gauff got off to a good start Monday in defending her U.S. Open tennis title. The 20-year-old African-American star defeated Varvara Gracheva of Russia in straight sets. Gauff, the number 3 seed at the U.S. Open, moves into Wednesday's second round. Gauff plays Tajana Maria of Germany at 9 a.m. Gauff won her first Grand Slam title when she won last year's U.S. Open. The Dodgers and Angels are back in action tonight after a day off on Monday. The Dodgers are at home for the start of a 3-game series against Baltimore. The Angels are in Detroit to try to snap a 5-game losing streak. ESPN rounded up a few experts to rank the top 100 NFL players entering the 2024 season. Here's the top 5. Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, Cleveland Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, and Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Linking social justice and climate justice all year long. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
Hello, LA. Metro is your partner for thriving communities and sustainable travel. We're dedicated to providing better transit for everyone. When you go Metro, you're more connected to jobs, healthcare, school, and loved ones. It's the way of the future. Start your journey at metro.net.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more. all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada. Member FDIC.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
I spray and scrub, but the soap scum in my bathtub is still there.
I spray and scrub, but the burnt sauce on my stovetop sticks around.
Sprays can leave grime behind, but Mr. Clean Ultra Foamy Magic Eraser combines the scrubbing power of an eraser with the cleaning power of Dawn to melt away tough messes on contact.
Just wet, squeeze, and erase.
Stop spraying, start erasing, and clean with more magic than ever with Ultra Foamy Magic Eraser.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
Sometimes he fails at fitting in, but we're okay with that. You're inside the Tavis Smiley Show.
You are indeed with Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, retired now. But we're talking in this hour, continuing our conversation, I should say, about Kamala Harris and what her foreign policy might look like. That's important, too, given all these hotspots around the globe. We've talked about Ukraine. We've talked about Russia. We've talked about Sudan. A number of other places have come up in this conversation. But we're just trying to get a sense of what foreign policy would look like over the next 4 years if and when Kamala Harris pulls this off in November. So there's been a lot of conversation of late. We saw a lot of this at the DNC, in fact. This dialogue about the rising threat of Christian nationalism. To my mind, it was a bit too much nationalism on display, even at the Democratic convention. I've already said that earlier in today's program. No need to unpack that anymore. I saw too much of that myself. That said, when we talk about the rising threat of Christian nationalism, we cannot deny that the Democratic Party itself has deep ties to the military-industrial complex, and that, again, can't be ignored when you examine their own policy positions. And I wonder what your thoughts are in that regard.
I think that, first of all, I'm not sure if I'm tracking you made a comment around nationalism at the convention. I will tell you that I may have not noticed it there in person. You
didn't hear all those chants of USA, USA. You didn't see all the flag waving. You didn't think you were in Milwaukee and not Chicago.
No, actually, that I was very, very happy to see that. So maybe I'll disagree with you on that one. I'll say why. I think the fact is that the American flag and patriotism has been usurped by the extremists. Mm-hmm. It is a flag that now, when you're driving, you see it when you're in a car hanging off the back of a big old F-150 or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, that's an extremist. That is somebody that looks at the world through the lens of anti-immigrant nativism, kind of less rights versus more rights for the American public. Happy to have inequality. And I really am happy to see the fact that the American flag is, the Democratic Party and Americans can see an opportunity to take back a healthy brand of patriotism, one that recognizes, the fact that we have been imperfect and we're striving to be a more perfect union, but that's the promise of America, and that it's not being owned by the MAGA French. So it made me very happy to see the American flag. I'm to tell you the truth.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. Again, my point of view is my POV. Yours is yours, and that's what this program is all about. Hearing different perspectives, I love it. You can never offend me with a different perspective in mind. I guess the question is, for me, where is the line for you? You obviously are a former military, so that answer in some ways doesn't necessarily surprise me. But for you, where is that line between patriotism and nationalism these days?
Yeah. So look, I guess I don't feel like I need to wear, I wore my flag on my sleeve literally for decades. Mm-hmm. It was part of my uniform.
Sure.
Is it something that I have on the front of my house and, on public display constantly? No, it's something that comes out for, 4th of July and things of that nature. I know who I am. I know that I believe in this country and I'm a patriotic American. But what I don't want is I don't want those symbols to be corrupted by a different, kind of a regressive notion of what this country was, a country that had still wrestled, but had much greater issues with regards to inequality and the treatment of the black population or Irish population or Italian population or Jewish population at various points in time. I mean, all of these immigrant populations, or frankly with a Native American population, if we go, that has been a consistent problem. So I guess that I want to be able to reclaim my view of patriotism and not have it be defined by, the folks that want to take it backwards.
Nope.
So, but in terms of what I think the Harris administration would look like, I think there is a self-serving nature amongst the military-industrial complex that is looking to squeeze out every bit of profit, and they spend enormous amounts of money with regards to lobbying. They have burrowed into the bureaucracy to make things kind of run their way. They put funds into congressional campaigns and politics up and down, and frankly, more heavily in the Republicans that have defined themselves as a party of national security and defense, as anachronistic as it is now. Certainly, they're not living up to it. I think the Democratic Party also has challenges in this sphere. They're not as beholden as the Republican Party. That doesn't mean that there isn't a lot more work to do to hold accountable either corruption in the way we deliver contracts, these massive contracts to defense firms. I would say that if you asked me this question, before February 2022, if you asked me this question 4 years ago, I would say that we had a bloated defense sector. We probably could have diverted some of those resources to social programs, helping the population catch up in education, retooling the workforce. I think I would be wrong because I probably didn't quite accurately appraise the real massive risks. The existential threats to the U.S. are those from foreign powers looking to destroy the U.S. That's the Russias of the world. That's China to a certain extent, probably slightly less belligerent because we're part of their formula of success, their trade and relationship and the security we provide around the world. But they want to supplant us. So in order to deter their aggression, we need to have a strong military, which means, unfortunately, this is one of those moments where we probably, if values suggest that we should be investing or shifting large budgets to domestic programs, we can't do that at the moment. We have to be able to be strong and defend ourselves and deter aggression.
Oh, Colonel Vindman, you just lost me. In this whole conversation, I've been trying to follow you, man, and you just lost me. We could not disagree more on the point that you have just made. Our military budget is already too bloated as it is. The numbers speak for themselves. Dr. King mentioned earlier in today's program, put it this way: budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. You can say what you say, but you are who you are. And your budget tells us who you are. Our military budget is far too bloated, and here you come now suggesting that we can't spend more on domestic issues because we got to spend more money on the military. You completely lost me, respectfully.
Yeah. So let me explain a little bit more why I see the world this way.
Hold that thought 1 second. Hold that thought 1 second. I'm watching my clock. I'm just not trying to cut you off, but I would have to cut you off in 30 seconds. So I want to hear your response and your retort, but we could not disagree more on spending more money on the military right now. I don't get that. I don't further get how we're going to marry and align this notion of hope and joy with a lethal military and one on steroids. If you have your way, we'll talk about that and give you a chance to respond when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well-trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone, and should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Mommy, want to play a game with me and Dad?
Mommy's not feeling good.
You need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with Dayquil VapoCool. It's Dayquil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
Come on, honey. Let's let Mommy rest.
You guys are amazing. And so is Dayquil VapoCool.
Dayquil VapoCool, the vaporizing daytime coughing, aching, fever, power through your day medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
And the top-rated African-American talk show host in the nation, according to Talkers Magazine. You're tapped in with Tavis Smiley right now.
9/11, Colonel Vindman, happened 23 years ago. Since 9/11, the greatest existential threat to this country has been inside this country from white supremacists. I could unpack that if I had the time, but you're a bright guy. You already know that. But here you come now suggesting that in the years to come, in a Harris administration, we need to spend less money on domestic issues and more money on the military?
Yeah. So, look, these are, of course, very, very serious issues. If we take a look at what we spent on defense during the Cold War to now, it's a fraction of what it's still a significant fraction, but it's significantly less. I think the Harris administration has an excellent plan to invest in key pockets of our domestic infrastructure. We've done that under the Biden administration. It'll carry forward through to the Harris administration. It'll include child tax credits. It'll include investments in education. The way that she's going to do this is that she's going to adjust the massive tax cuts that Trump offered to the wealthy, and make sure that the wealthy pay their fair share. That they can't, they can't kind of evade based on unearned income from massive tax portfolios for the billionaire class. Stock portfolios for the billionaire class. We have the resources to draw additional receipts into the federal budget and spend on domestic programs while hardening our defense. I don't think it needs to be a trade-off. The problem is that you had under the Trump administration these massive tax cuts to corporations and to wealthy individuals. The reason I'm advocating for investments, smart investments, not necessarily the same kind of bloated programs that we've had with an egregious amount of abuse. I think you probably are aware of the fact that the DOD has never had kind of a full audit. That has to change eventually. The DOD has to be accountable. Like, even though it's a massive money pit, it needs to be accountable like the rest of government. It needs to be able to audit its books and hold to account itself as well as the programs it funds. We could do that, but I still think there's going to have to be some growth based on the threat environment. Like I said, we live in a world in which, the next 5 years potentially define the next 20 years. That is whether China is deterred from attacking Taiwan in the South China Sea, or Russia is deterred from more military adventurism. In order to do this, we need to make sure that we look strong. It's capability and intent. The capability comes from our industrial base. The intent is the will and the resolve of our leadership. We need both of those in order to achieve this. But we could do all of these things. We have a $27 trillion economy. We just need to make sure that we balance the way we take in taxes.
Let me say this as a footnote, a final footnote on this issue, and we'll come forward in our remaining moments with Colonel Alexander Vindeman and talk about Trump a bit and his involvement in that Trump impeachment trial. But these are the facts. In 2023, the United States spent approximately $820 billion, $820 billion last year on military spending, which accounted for about 13.3% of the federal budget last year, 13.3% at $820 billion. This made the U.S. the country with the highest military spending in the whole world in 2023, accounting for more than 40% of the world's total military spending. The U.S. has been increasing its military spending in current dollars since 2016, and spending increased significantly in 2022 after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And yet, with all due respect, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindeman wants more military spending. I digress. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Helping to stretch your moral and political imagination. This is Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit LAFLA.org. LAFLA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey LA,
Today I'm here to talk to you about Grid Alternatives, which is a nonprofit in LA that focuses on renewable energy. We serve communities who have been left out of the renewable energy sector. We offer paid job training, and in 13 weeks, you can become a solar installer. 80% of our graduates get hired into the industry, and once you're hired in the industry, you stop at a high, medium income. That could be $20 an hour or more. 80% of our graduates get hired into the industry. Call today so you don't be left out at 323-861-0105 or gridalternatives.org, gridalternatives.org.
Freedom is an endless meeting. So let's get back to it with Tavis Smiley.
I've got 4 minutes left in this conversation, just 4 minutes. I will give all of it to Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman to respond to the following question, which is, while we've been talking about whether or not Democrats can marry their campaign of hope and joy with lethal military policies, should Kamala Harris win, the other side is what happens if Donald Trump gets reelected. Speaking of existential threats, your response, you were, as I mentioned earlier, you spoke at the impeachment. You testified rather, not spoke. You testified at the impeachment of Donald Trump, so you know this story rather well. What are your concerns militarily if he gets reelected?
It would be tragic and disastrous for the U.S. domestically and overseas. I just want to quickly say that we are near an all-time low as a percentage of GDP on defense spending. We're about 2.7%. During the height of the Iran-Iraq wars, we were at 4.5%. Historically, we're as high as 5.5% in the Cold War. And even earlier in the Cold War, it was even 11% of GDP. We are 2.7%. We are underinvesting in our national defense. But and you know what? One thing that you could expect the Trump administration to do is they would spend a lot of resources on national defense, but at the same time undermine those capabilities that are being built with a resolve and the way that Trump conducts himself on the foreign policy environment. He would be an awesome friend to our enemies and inspire fear amongst our alliances. He has already invited Putin to Putin to attack our allies. He is likely to be highly transactional with regards to China and wheeling and dealing, deal making. Same thing with regards to authoritarian regimes elsewhere, even the ones that we consider friends for whatever reason, like the Saudis. So this would instill an enormous amount of chaos and an unpredictability and make the U.S. weaker in aggregate, even if we are spending more under a Trump administration. I can't overstate the fact that just in Europe alone, cheerleading for Russia is likely to encourage Russia to attack and destabilize Europe and probably draw Europe into a larger war. This is likely to be writ large in other corners of the world. So it would be an absolute total disaster, even if Kamala Harris's, our views on what her foreign policy looks like are not entirely clear. The outlines are awesome, and I'm highly supportive. They would be, there is no comparison in relative terms to Trump.
In the 60 seconds I have left, here's my question. How strong do we have to look? If we're spending that much money, we're spending 40% of the world's spending on military excursions and military equipment. How much do we need to flex, Colonel? I mean, how strong do we need to look?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. China is going to be, approaching the mid 350 ships, capital ships, in just the region it's concerned about. We'll have less than that around the world. What we need to do is we don't necessarily need to be symmetric, match them ship for ship. We need to have advanced capabilities. We need to invest in the future. These kind of advanced systems that are going to give us the edge, through innovation. But we need to be sufficiently strong to deter in this next critical period our adversaries that seem to be kind of surging forward. And it is just a difficult challenge for any administration to handle. Kamala Harris would do this far better than Trump. She has my absolute support, and I'll do whatever I can to help kind of nurture her views, or support her however I can.
He is former Director of European Affairs for the U.S. National Security Council, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who has shared his thoughts with us in this hour about what foreign policy is going to look like in the next 4 years, whether Kamala Harris wins or Donald Trump wins. And if Donald Trump wins, God help us all. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, good to have you on, sir. All the best to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The Biden administration is bringing back a new round of free COVID-19 tests. At the end of September, people will be able to order up to 4 tests